Hey, this is Ishar, and in today's talk, I want to go over how to stay motivated and disciplined as an INFP personality type. So, for a lot of INFPs, we really struggle with staying motivated and being consistent at whatever we do. So, at times, it may feel that we don't have enough energy to go about our tasks, or perhaps once we get started on something, we get a bit lazy and we're like, "Oh, I don't want to continue," and we lack the consistency that is associated with discipline to follow through upon our goals. So today I'll be clarifying a bit more as to how to increase your motivation and at the same time also staying consistent and improving your discipline as well. And you'll find that learning how to become more motivated and disciplined will really enrich all aspects of your life because as INFPs, we have a lot of potential as we are really creative, highly expressive, and we have a lot of great ideas in our minds. But if we're unable to follow through upon that and take action, then we waste a lot of our potential that we naturally have. So, first, I'd like to go over the difference between motivation and discipline. So, motivation is related to more on the energy side of things. So, it is responsible for giving you that burst of energy when you start a new project. So, it has that feeling related to passion and everything's really exciting. So, motivation will help you get things started. And as an INFP, you're probably really familiar with this if you ever started like a new book or starting a new project where everything seems very new and exciting, and you just have all this energy to learn more about the specific topic that you're working on, and everything just feels like optimistic for you. And motivation will give you that extra spark to put in your best effort. So you'll go the extra mile, and rather than going through the motions of a task, you really engage all your senses. And motivation is responsible for great pieces of work, and a lot of artists and writers will tap into this quality to come up with something amazing. So motivation is really passion driven. However, you can't really expect yourself to continue running like that all the time because eventually your motivation will dip. So there'll definitely be times where you just don't feel like working or working on the tasks you're supposed to be working on. And this is where discipline starts to kick in. So discipline, on the other hand, is all about remaining consistent in whatever you're doing. So it's less reliant on the flux of emotions, but rather you're continuing off the habits you've already created. So discipline is very consistent and it is very steady. So it doesn't go up and down. You're just going to do whatever you say you're going to do every single day without fail. And if we study success in terms of long-term success, we'll know that discipline is what will get you the result in the long run. Because if you have this burst of energy and then you just all of a sudden stop, well, you're not going to accomplish as much as someone who is consistently doing the work every single day. Now, the passion will give you that life force or energy involved, where rather than going through the motions, you imbue your work with a certain level of extra zest, and this will produce better quality, obviously. But you need a balance of both. So you need that motivation to provide you that energy and passion, but then also the discipline to remain consistent in whatever you do, so you achieve more in the long term. So now that we understand a bit about discipline and also motivation, let's see how this relates to an INFP specifically and how INFPs can improve these qualities. So one helpful way to really understand this a bit more is to understand an INFP's cognitive function stack. So cognitive functions, if you're new, are just lenses of perspectives through which each type interacts with the world. So there's a certain order in which each cognitive functions are laid out. So the cognitive functions that are higher up are a bit more accessible for INFPs, at least early in age, and then the bottom functions tend to be slightly out of reach until an INFP has like really worked on them, or until adulthood as well, where they naturally kind of tune in. So now for an INFP's most dominant function, so again, this is something that comes very natural for INFPs, is introverted feeling. So this is a feeling-based function that looks inwards to see how things align with one's own morals, one's own preferences. So it's very subjective in nature. Now, how this relates to motivation and discipline, this is the function that really gives you that motivation to go forward. So it's a feeling based function. So whenever you say read a new book or watch a new show or work on a new project, your feeling based function is really kicking in, saying, "Oh, this is really cool. I want to focus in on this." So this is what is involved with giving you that short term energy and burst of energy where you go after a task. So our introverted feeling function is then supported by our second function, which is an auxiliary function known as extroverted intuition. So it's an extroverted function that goes out into the world. So extroverted intuition is all about different possibilities. So this again is relates to motivation, Because if you recall, when you're motivated, you're like looking at possibilities and, oh, I could do this and what if. So extroverted intuition is responsible for that. So you can see that your first two functions are related to motivation, and this is why a lot of INFPs have no problem getting things started. Now, our third function is called introverted sensing. So with this function, you are looking inwards, you're taking in information in the environment around you, but comparing it to a reference from the past. So this is responsible for discipline. And you'll actually notice that certain personality types that have introverted sensing as their number one function, so this would be the ISTJ and ISFJ personality type, they are very disciplined. And this is because this is all about the past. So naturally, they keep up with their habits that they've created, and they really like tradition and things that have worked in the past. They like to replicate that. So they're very good at maintaining and following routines that they always have. So this is very hard for INFPs because this is our third function, so it's a bit less accessible. And in the Myers-Briggs community, this third function is also known as the child function, meaning that we sometimes neglect it. So for INFPs, we tend to forget about discipline half the time. And then lastly, our inferior function. So this is the bottom function for us. So it is a bit less accessible until later on for INFPs, until we've consciously worked on it. Extroverted thinking, which is our last function, is involved with looking outside oneself to see what needs to be done and accomplished and working on that in an objective fashion. So rather than being very subjective, which is our natural function as introverted feelers, extroverted thinking is black and white. So it doesn't really care about your feelings, just let's get this done. So this is why it's very hard for INFPs because it goes against our natural tendencies. Okay, so now how do we use this specific information to help us? So the understanding of our cognitive functions. So the first tip I like to give is use your introverted feeling function and your extroverted intuition function to help you get motivated. And the way to do this is to number one, use your emotions and really get excited about whatever you're about to do. And also visualize. So use your imagination, which comes from your extroverted intuition function. So let's use an example such as going to the gym. So a lot of people really want to work on their health and their fitness, so they enroll into a gym membership. Now, how another type would approach going to the gym would be that they may look at their end goal, say, losing weight or gaining muscle or achieving a certain number in their bench press or squat or whatever their goals are, and they'll say, okay, if I put in the work now, I will get to this point in this many years. So they are being very systematical about that. Or perhaps if they're an extroverted feeler, they may say, hey, I want to join the gym with all my friends because they're all going. But these types of approaches don't really work for INFPs. So many INFPs struggle because they're adapting to someone else's model of how to approach things. And in reality, we should be focusing on what works for us. So for INFPs, if we're taking this gym example, rather than looking at your goals, try to get motivated. So rather than benching, say, 200 pounds or whatever the case is, what would benching 200 pounds give you? Like, what does it do for you? So what type of person would you be if you're able to lift that weight? Or what type of person would you be once you've achieved your ideal physique? How would your health look like? And visualize, how would you walk around now that you have more energy? And what types of people would you meet? So say you're going to the gym, would you make new friends? And actually visualize from the end point. So a lot of visualization practices, a law of attraction practices, and I talk about that a lot and even written a book about that. These things really help INFPs because we're able to tap into our highly imaginative faculties and also our feeling-based faculties because it's very personal to you. So we're really interested about the type of person we become. So if you're tackling this one goal of going to the gym and becoming healthier, rather than look at the numbers of things, try to see what kind of person you'll be. And that really excites INFPs because it's very personal for you. Let's take another example of applying for a job. So how another type, say an ISTJ, would approach this who's leading with introverted sensing. They'd be like, okay, I'm going to take this job so I can have financial security. And in 15 years or whatever the case is, I'm going to retire and I'll have all these funds saved up. So that's one way of approaching things. Now, again, this doesn't work for INFPs because there's no passion involved with this. So in order to stay motivated for an INFP, we need to involve our emotions and then use our visualizations. So when you're applying for a job, say in another city, you can visualize the type of lifestyle you'd be living now in this new city. What would you be doing with the salary increase with this new job? So what would you be spending it on? Who would you be hanging out with on the weekends? How would you conduct your life? What would your day-to-day lifestyle be like in this new job? And if these things excite you, then go for it. So this will give you that motivation. So now let's go on to step two. So you've found what you want to focus on and you visualize, and now you're really excited to work on whatever it is you're focusing on. How do we stay consistent now? So this is where you'll utilize or tap into your introverted sensing function of staying disciplined. And the best way for INFPs to do this is to start off very small and repeat this. So rather than go to the gym and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this entire workout for an hour and work on my chest and bench and then do these flies and do all this elaborate exercise and do this every multiple times a week, just start off very small. So go to the gym, maybe do a couple push-ups, and go home. Now, this may seem very absurd because you're only doing a very small amount, but what is more important is keeping this discipline. So just doing a few minutes and then coming back the next day and doing that and then doing it next day, and then without fail, even though you're doing a very small action, over time this expands. And then what will happen is that you'll naturally identify yourself as someone who goes to the gym. And this identity level change will actually transform you a bit more. And also, by creating this mini habit, you get used to that action that you're performing. And what you'll notice is that the hardest part of any task is just starting. So it's kind of like riding a bike, where maybe the first time of doing it is very hard, but over time you don't really have to think about it. It happens on autopilot. So for me, meditation is one of those things where when I first started, I could only do 15 minutes a day, and I start off doing that, but I do it every single day. And now if I do like 2 or 3 hours a day, like it's not very hard for me because I've built up that habit. And in fact, if I don't meditate for that long, I'll feel like kind of restless or anxious, like kind of as if like I didn't brush my teeth or shower for the day. I'm just like, oh, okay, I need to do it. So habits will really create that ease where you can do that every single day. And this is related to the discipline aspect. So just start off small and just do that every single day without fail. And once you've had that habit in place, then you don't really have to worry about staying disciplined because it just comes natural to you. It's just something that you do. And that's the point you want to get at. And then tapping into our inferior function, which is extroverted thinking, this is all about metrics and tracking things. So you can track your daily progress and your small steps. But you do that in an Excel spreadsheet, or if you have like a notebook, you can just write it down that I went to the gym today, or you've applied for a job like you said you were. And as long as you track your progress, then your brain will look at it and say, okay, I'm on the right track. And this will give you more motivation and more discipline. So it's funny how it works in like a little feedback loop where if you track your progress, and because you're doing very small habits, which you're able to do every single day, well, that feeds into this. So you can see your progress every single day that you're making. And with this objectivity function, you don't really fall into lack of discipline because you can clearly see when you've done a task and when you've not. So there's no excuses. And if you really are doing this very small habits every day, then there's really no reason to skip a day. So this is how you can see that when you tap into your cognitive functions, you're able to be as disciplined and as motivated as the other types, but you're going about it in a different way. So this is why I've kind of catered this talk for INFPs specifically, so you can see how to stay disciplined and how to stay motivated in that fashion. So in the comments, what I'd like to know is, what are you currently working on where you need to tap into motivation and your discipline? And maybe find an accountability partner in the comments. That'd be kind of cool, right? So I hope you like this talk and stay tuned for more.